When I got out of the shower, I felt the most intense fatigue that I've ever felt in my life. I've never been that tired.
At just 33 years old, Meliah Bowers-Jefferson had a Widowmaker heart attack. Initially, it wasn't diagnosed.
Doctors told me that I was experiencing pneumonia, and they sent me home.
What?
I know, isn't that crazy?
They sent you home?
They sent me home.
Emergency physician Dr. Jonathan Leake says women's heart attack symptoms are often missed.
Women sometimes are more likely to develop kind of like nausea or kind of what we call atypical symptoms, just this kind of feeling of anxiety or impending, doom instead of just actually feeling pain.
Meliah shares her incredible survival story and message of hope.
I was able to gain some perspective and say, well, maybe it didn't prevent the heart attack itself, but it was definitely the reason why I was able to survive it.
Welcome to the Wellness Files, a podcast where we explore practical tools, research, and real stories. I'm your host, Carrie Beal, and today we're sitting down with Meliah Bowers-Jefferson, and we also hear from emergency care doctor Jonathan Leake.
All right, we're here with Meliah Bowers-Jefferson, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You were 33 years old when you had a Widowmaker heart attack. Take me back to that moment and what that was like.
Oh my goodness. So that moment was, I would not describe the actual moment that it happened as scary because I didn't know what was happening. For me, that day just felt off. I felt sick, almost like I had the flu. And so I called in to my employer at the time and just said, I think I'm going to stay home this morning and I'll let you know how I feel later on. And over the course of the morning, I just didn't really feel much better. But I was a new mother at that time. My daughter had just turned a year old, and it was almost the time when she would be coming home from childcare. And so I thought, let me pull it together. And so I got up and I went to take a shower. When I got out of the shower, I felt the most intense fatigue that I've ever felt in my life. I've never been that tired. I was weak. I was sweating profusely, but I was cold. I almost felt like I couldn't make it from my bathroom to my bed, and it's one space, right? It's the main bedroom with a attached bathroom. That weakness was so intense that I really felt like something is wrong, but I didn't know what was wrong. So it wasn't until later when I found out that I had experienced a heart attack that like the real fear came around. But that moment of actually experiencing it, it wasn't like anything that you ever hear about on television. There was no intense chest pain. There wasn't, a lot of other symptoms that I think people normally think about. If you grew up when I did, you think of like Fred Sanford grabbing your heart, falling down. None of that really happened, but it was just, I knew something was wrong. I just wasn't sure what was wrong.
So you were in your bedroom, you started feeling this way. What did you do after that?
Well, I called my partner, my spouse at the time. He was working from home, and I couldn't call out. I was so weak. Luckily, I had my cell phone close to me, and I called him on the cell phone and I said, something's wrong. I think I need to go to the doctor. And so we got dressed quickly, went to the emergency room, and by the time I got to the emergency room, I actually felt a little bit better. But I went in and I explained what I was feeling, and I think because I was so young, additionally, I probably presented as someone who looked fairly healthy. The ER doctors told me that I was experiencing pneumonia, and they sent me home.
What?
I know, isn't that crazy?
They sent you home?
They sent me home, even though I disclosed, this intense or this very robust family history of heart disease and heart issues, that still wasn't enough to trigger in their mind that this 33-year-old woman who looks fairly healthy is presenting to us with a heart attack. But they sent me home and told me to follow up with my primary care physician if I didn't feel better. Well, a little bit of time goes by,
like
a couple of days,
couple of days
go by, and I did not feel better. So I followed up with my primary care physician. I walked into her office and she's talking to me about, you know, what's going on, what are you feeling? And I could tell looking at her face that she immediately thought something is really wrong here. She ran so many blood tests, and as soon as those blood test results came in, she called me and said, I need you to come into my office today. I went into her office and she looked at me and said, if I had not met you in person, I would think that you are a 70-year-old morbidly obese man with, you know, chronic health conditions, given the way my blood work showed up. She immediately referred me to a cardiologist. Believe it or not, it was still probably a couple of weeks before I got diagnosed with having, you know, had a heart attack.
Did it like get better? Because you had that moment where you couldn't even walk.
Right. No, it did not get better. I still felt extremely fatigued over that time. I started having some pain radiate from my shoulder and my back, but still never intense chest pain. Mm-hmm. And my cardiologist ordered a battery of tests, including a stress test. And when I went in for my stress test, I couldn't even complete the stress test because when they did the first part of it, which I believe is a echocardiogram, the technician paused my test and went to get the doctor, and the doctor said, we need to get you over to the Cath lab. So even then, after hearing we need to get you over to the Cath lab, my mind was immediately thinking, okay, I have all these things to do. Like my daughter's, you know, like I gotta,
you're worried about
you know, all the chores and all the things I have to do at work. And yeah. I'm like, okay, so like, are we talking next week? He's like, no, we're talking now, right? So I went to the Cath lab, and that's when they discovered that I had a complete blockage, 100% blockage of my LAD. So I had, and they could tell that it wasn't something that happened immediately because of the damage to my heart. The doctor came in after my catheterization and said, at some point in the past, you had a Widowmaker heart attack, and we're really lucky that you're still here.
So I spoke to an emergency care doctor, Dr. Jonathan Leake. Mm-hmm. I was initially speaking to him about another podcast episode on NAD therapy, but he spoke about how this happens to the heart, and he said something else. So I want to listen to that real quick. We'll listen to a little bit of what he had to say about the Widowmaker heart attack.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know what we call a Widowmaker heart attack is usually this large vessel in the heart that gets obstructed, you know, and so what we call an LAD, or the left anterior descending artery, and so it's the main artery that most of our hearts rely on for getting blood flow. And people often don't understand that, you know, that the heart has to have blood flow too, so it has arteries that go to it, and so those are the ones that get blocked when we have a heart attack. And so, you know, what can happen when that artery gets blocked is because it's supplying most of the blood flow to the heart, it can cause the heart to go out of rhythm, which can be fatal, you know, almost instantly, right, if the heart starts beating in not a positive way. Or it could be more slow in that it really is damaging the heart and causing severe muscle loss to the heart, you know, which could lead you with chronic heart failure or even death, you know, as well from heart failure. And so, you know, often if that vessel is spontaneously occluded, you're going to feel it. You're going to get severe chest pain, you know, sweating, all these kind of symptoms, arm pain, these symptoms that we know about for a heart attack. But if the onset is slower, you know, that you've just slowly had this blockage developing, and then maybe you overexert yourself or put too much stress on the heart, that's where this kind of Widowmaker, you know, physiology can happen, and that all of a sudden it's just not quite enough blood supply for what the heart demands or what it needs. And those symptoms can be a little more subtle, you know, maybe a little bit more breathlessness, just kind of feeling like you can't quite catch your breath, maybe kind of an odd sensation in the chest. Women sometimes are more likely to develop kind of like nausea or kind of what we call atypical symptoms, just this kind of feeling of anxiety or impending, you know, doom instead of just actually feeling pain. And so that's why this can go missed in women sometimes, because the symptoms can be sensed or felt a little bit differently.
All right, so coming out of that, he kind of explained what happens when you have a Widowmaker heart attack. And then what I thought was really interesting, he said, some women may develop anxiety or impending doom instead of feeling pain. Now, I think you felt pain, but it sounded like you also felt that anxiety, right?
For sure. I mean, I think I definitely felt more a sense that something is wrong, but not knowing what was wrong, more so than pain. Yeah. I don't ever remember feeling any type of intense pain. It was more this feeling, I don't know how else to describe it, that there is something really wrong with me, but I don't know what it is. And honestly, even with my knowledge of the history of heart disease in my family, it never crossed my mind that I was actually having a heart attack. I didn't know what was happening, but I never thought, oh, this is it. This is my heart attack. And that feeling of anxiety is definitely something that resonates with me.
So when the cardiologist did all those tests and confirmed that you had a Widowmaker heart attack, what was the next step from there?
So the next step from having the Cath and discovering the heart attack, we did stenting. So I had a stent to open up that blockage. And unfortunately, by the time they discovered the blockage, I had already experienced a lot of damage to my heart. So about 1/3 of my heart muscle was already dead. And I think the doctor mentioned that, you know, that could be one of the impacts of not discovering a Widowmaker heart attack soon enough, is that there's some longer term damage. So that's what happened to me. I had this longer term damage, which meant that even when they were able to restore blood flow to my heart, I still had compromised heart function. At that point, I was actually probably in heart failure. And so I was monitored at the hospital, and before I could leave, they fitted me with something called a LifeVest, right, which is a wearable defibrillator, because the doctors were concerned that if I had another cardiac event, I was not going to make it back to the hospital. I was not going to make it to the time when EMS, emergency personnel, could get to me. So I needed to be wearing my emergency support with me at all times. So it's a vest that has all of these different leads or points that will shock the heart if it discovers a rhythm that's all for heart stoppage. And for me, that is when the intense, I would say, anxiety and fear creeped in. It's one thing to hear that, okay, you have this blockage, then a next level of, it was a Widowmaker heart attack that could have killed you. It's another thing to hear, and we don't think that you would survive another event. And so I ended up wearing that defibrillator for nearly 9 months as I went through you know, a series of additional tests and monitoring with various doctors, both here in the upstate and at the Mayo Clinic, to determine kind of what was my life going to be after that.
And so what has it been like? Is it harder for you to do exercises, activities?
So I think that I am someone who's really fortunate. First, fortunate to have survived the Widowmaker heart attack, and also fortunate to still be here 13 years later. A lot of the tests that I underwent had to do with determining whether or not they needed to implant a defibrillator in me. And when I was speaking with the specialist at the Mayo Clinic, there was this one particular doctor that thought, you're young, we think that the level of physical activity that you're at, we can, with medication and robust cardiac rehab, we think maybe we can get you out of the stage of needing an implantable defibrillator. So they gave me some time to work on my heart health with the doctor's guidance. And luckily, I was actually able to improve my heart function to a point where the implantable defibrillator was no longer recommended for me as a course of action. And from there, I've just continued to really monitor and work on my health along with my doctor's guidance. And I've not had another cardiac event since. And I feel so fortunate that that is the case, because that's often not how it happens. So, you know, I think I went through this period of wondering, why me? Why did this happen to me? And then that transitioned into a period of me understanding and believing that I'm incredibly lucky, incredibly fortunate, and there's a reason that I'm here to, you know, spread information so that other people can avoid this. But certainly being physically active at the time when the heart attack occurred was very helpful. I mean, I was working out every day. I was running. I was lifting weights. I believe, and my doctors believe, that my heart's ability to compensate for that loss of blood circulation was because I was exercising. And while I was beating myself up about, you know, why didn't this prevent it, I was able to gain some perspective and say, well, maybe it didn't prevent the heart attack itself, but it was definitely the reason why I was able to survive it and now continue to thrive in my life.
Are there certain activities that are hard to do now? I mean, like, how is your heart after that? Because they said you lost some of its function.
Yeah, so over time, I've been able to increase the amount of activity that I can do, but I definitely get tired quicker than most people would. Immediately after the heart attack, I could not walk to the mailbox and back without feeling extremely fatigued. You know, I feel like there was probably like 2 years of my daughter's life where I was not an active participant in her activities or her life because it was just too exhausting for me to do that. I remember one particular birthday party that she went to that was at a farm, and I look back on the pictures and she's absolutely gorgeous, and my best friend helped her have a great experience. But like, I missed the first time my daughter rode on a horse. I, you know, didn't get to see her introduced to, you know, chicks and all these other little things. I just kind of had to look at it in pictures afterwards. That was really hard for me. And at the same time, motivation for me to do everything I could to get better. So I continued with cardiac rehab. I continued to try to eat well, manage my weight, which has gone up and down, but, you know, I've been able to manage it pretty well over time. And eventually, I've worked up to the point where I can engage in, I would say, pretty normal activities with her. I'm not out running marathons, but you know, I can definitely get through a 5K slower than most people, but still get through it. So I think there has been some limitation on the amount of physical activity that I can engage in. But I do get the opportunity to live a fairly normal life right now.
How old is your daughter now?
Oh my goodness, she's about to be 14 in a month or so. She'll be 14. I just cannot believe it. And she was only a year when this happened to me.
Wow. What advice do you have for people who might have gone through something similar, whether it's Widowmaker or a different type of heart attack?
Yeah, definitely listen and work with your doctors to maintain and improve your health. I think it's important to listen to your own body when you feel like something is wrong. Pay attention to that and don't stop advocating for yourself until they figure out what the root cause of that issue is. I think it's also important, something that helped me a lot was talking with a mental health professional. This, you know, being this close to death and then working through all of the ways my life was compromised as a result, that takes an emotional toll, a mental toll on you. And so if you're going through anything like this, whether it's a heart issue or some other health issue, I think it's important to really talk to a professional about that so that you can figure out how to manage anxiety or depression that might be linked to it, because the way you think about your life has a lot of impact on your physical wellness. And so I think it's important for people to think about that as well. And then also keep in perspective, you don't have to do this alone. Regardless of whether or not you have a spouse or a close-knit circle of people, you can always find support groups in the community. And for me, it was an extended group of people that wrapped their arms around me to just make sure that I was okay. I would not be where I am today without, my tribe. Support, absolutely.
Okay. Anything else you want to add before we conclude?
No, I just really appreciate you highlighting this issue. It's something that people don't necessarily think about a lot, but it impacts so many people and particularly has a disparate impact on women and people of color.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Meliah, for joining us, breaking all that down, and sharing your story.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Wellness Files with Carrie Beal. If you like what you heard, make sure to follow us on Spotify or Apple. You can also leave a review or comment there. And if you're listening or watching on YouTube, make sure to save this playlist. This way you can see new episodes as they come out. They should be released every Wednesday. And I'm also on social media. Again, my name's Carrie Beal. You can follow me there. And on Substack, I post a summary of the podcast and other health stories that I'm working on. Thanks for listening.